All right, I'm Trudy Carmichael. I'm from Marietta, Georgia, and today is January the 15th, 2004, and we're meeting in the home of George Merritt, and he has graciously told his story, and now we're going to hear the story from Winford Alexander Gaines, who lives at 1623 Coldwater Road in Elberton, Georgia. Zip is 30635. His telephone number is 706-283-1750. Now, Winford, you were born in Elberton, Georgia on January the 7th, 1918. Is that correct?
I've just had a birthday, and it
sure
shook the ground.
You and I both had birthdays. Well, I'd like to find out a little bit about your childhood. Think back and give us a little bit about your childhood, your family, your siblings, or whatever you'd like to tell us.
I tell my cousin, Clyde Adams, that we were poor, but we didn't know it. We had plenty to eat. We lived on a farm, raised cotton, and we didn't know we was poor, though, but we were poor. And we just did a lot of things that poor folks did, I reckon. But like I said, my mother was a good cook, and we never did go hungry.
Okay, well, that's a lot to be said. Now, what about your family? Did you have brothers and sisters? Or?
Yeah, I had a brother 2 years older than me. He died when he was 59 years old. He got back from in the Army, and he worked at an air base, and he worked on airplanes, and the wings were coated inside with asbestos, and he got cancer, and that's what got him. And now they're doing a whole lot of things for that, but now back then they didn't, and he didn't have a chance. So he died when he was 59 years old. And then I had a little baby brother, James I, and we always thought, my daddy never did say it, but we was over there working in the field, and they had a funeral in the church there, right across the road from where we were, and the family didn't have a preacher, and they came across in the field there and asked my daddy would he help with the funeral, and this fella had diphtheria, and we always thought that that's how my little brother got that. Back then they didn't have a vaccination, you know. And he died. He was two years old. So it's just me and my brother Byron.
Now, you were raised in what area now?
That's in Coldwater community.
Okay, so you pretty well stayed there most of your boyhood and all,
yeah.
and you went to school there?
It's a one-room schoolhouse right across the road from me. I went there 1 year. I walked from over where we lived up there to that school, and I never will forget that. One teacher there, and she'd call a class up in the front of the room, and I'd talk to them, and then they'd go back and sit back in that class, and then another class would move up there. I'll never will forget that. But I went there one year.
Okay. Well, now, you joined the Air Force, is that correct?
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I talked to this old boy, and he was telling me about flying, and he said he sure wished he could have got into it, and he kept talking about flying. And I started getting up some papers together, and my mother was helping me. And then I was living in Atlanta. I'd done finished Young Harris College, and I'd walk the street in Atlanta hunting jobs, and you couldn't beg a job. And I finally got a job out there with Deutsch Baking Company. I don't know whether any of y'all have heard of it or not, but it was out in the west end of Atlanta. And I never will forget Mr. Deutsch. He looked at me, and I just had finished Young Harris College, you know. He said, "You don't want to work for me?" He says, you've been to college. I said, "Mr. Deutsch, I was raised on a farm. I can do any kind of work." And he finally hired me cleaning brick. And I cleaned brick for about 3 or 4 days, and he came by there and he says, "Can you drive a truck?" I said, "Oh, yes, sir." And I didn't know anything about Atlanta. And the old boy inside, he'd send me uptown, Mr. Doyce would, and this boy would write it out on a sheet of paper how to get there. But I started driving the truck for the Doyce Baking Company till I was had to get in the Army.
Now, where were you, or do you remember where you were? December the 7th, 1941, you said you went into the Army in 41. Was this prior to Pearl Harbor or after? Or?
I never will forget that. So we were in Atlanta, and like I say, I was getting my papers up to file for cadet. Congress had to prove you back then for getting the cadet training. So I was getting my papers together, but I got a notice that I was going to be drafted. And so I went down to the draft office there, and there was 2 boys there from Carolina. And he kept telling us to go ahead and sign in. And either they'd sign us in or drafted. And he, old sergeant, we ought to shot him, but he told us that if we signed in and wasn't drafted, he'd let us out every night and go into town. We could go into town. So we signed up, and we'd draw $21 a month instead of $30. So that was a big mistake.
A lot of money back then, too, wasn't it?
But it's 3 of the boys, and both of them were planning on going into flight training, too, but that numbers came up to be drafted. And so we got in and we stayed, and then they sent us up to Missouri, and then we all signed up to go to radio school. And we went down to Scottsville, Illinois, in radio school. And I like about 2 weeks graduating, and my papers come through to be a cadet. And a fellow, the CO down there, tried to get me to stay, and I said, "Oh, I want to get into flying." So we got on the train from Illinois going back to Texas, and it's at night, and we had a wreck, crash. We run into another train, and it was just dark. All the lights went out and everything, and they came through the cars there, and they looking for Army personnel to help them. They knew some people got killed, and they wanted them found, and they asked us would we get out and look for them. And I remember walking in old oil up nearly to my ankles, and I stepped on a person's head. I never will forget that. As long as I live, I can still feel it. And but it was about, I think, 5 or 7 engineers on the train killed at that. And but we helped them, and I know they took our shoes, and we throwed them away, just running them, walking out there in that oil. But I never will forget that. And,
now that was going...
that was on the way to Texas.
On the way
San
to
Antonio.
Texas, okay.
That was on
And
the
so
way to
you
San
went there
Antonio.
for your cadet training?
Yeah,
Okay.
and all of my flying training was in Texas. We went through quite a bit there in San Antonio, and then they sent us up to Ballinger, Texas. That's up in the north end of Texas for the primary. And what always got me, about 80% of the boys washed out. They were awful on us. I never will forget one little old boy. He was about 4 inches too short. And we'd lay him on a table and stretch him. And you know, we added about 2 inches to him.
Is that right?
We'd pull on him, and he'd holler and go,
Oh, my goodness.
but we stretched him, and
Did he make it?
yeah, he stayed on and made it. He went through, sure did. But I never will forget that.
I bet he's never forgotten it either.
And another thing I never will forget, I know not to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. Our instructors were awful. They'd get about cuss us out. They just talked awful to us. And I had about, I guess about 4 hours training, and it was in this little PT-9, and he'd sitting in the back seat, and we'd be sitting in front. And he'd be hollering at you, turn right, turn left, and all like that. And I never will forget it long as I live. His name was Downs. And I heard him yell out, he says, "My God," he said, "you started flying." And flying is you working your stick and all, and you got to coordinate with your feet, with the rudder. And I started doing that. And that's
Hey,
what...
you wasn't supposed to do that, huh?
No, that's good if you can work it together, if it's coordinated. But I never will forget in my life him hollering out there, "My God, you started flying." He said, "Take us back to the field and land." And I take it back, and they sent me up by myself.
So that was the beginning of your flying career then,
That was the beginning, and I never will forget
well,
it.
that's great. That's great. So I would call that a very memorable.
But we went, that's Ballinger Primary, and we went back to Randolph Field. That's down in San Antonio. And they showed it beat us around down there at Claire. And at least 50% of the boys washed out. That always got me.
Just couldn't take it, huh?
And then we went down to Victoria, Texas. That's down on the coast, and that's where we got our advanced flying. And I never will forget the instructor. He was a wild one. Great goodness alive. Had a big sign on the dash that said, "Do not spin this airplane." And he'd get you up, and he said, "Spin it to the right." And after you come out of it, he said, "Spin it to the left." And there's a big sign up there saying, don't spin it.
Evidently that wasn't his sign, huh?
He was a wild one. But we finally got through. I never will forget that.
So when did you get finished with flying, with your training then?
Oh, have mercy, I can't remember the dates.
You don't remember the dates, but...
But that we finished down there.
Okay.
And,
then where did you go from there?
let's see, we went down to Savannah, and then in Waycross, and that's where we did our training down there, dive bombing.
Dive bombing,
Yeah.
okay.
And
were you enjoying all that? Did you really?
oh Lord, yeah, well we did. We didn't have no sense, and I never will forget. No, that was after we got back from overseas. We was down in Florida mostly, and they'd make us fly on the weekend, and we'd get out there on the coast and get down about 3 or 4 foot off the water, and these people would be in these platoons and stuff out there, and they'd see us coming, they'd jump out, and we'd go all the way to Miami doing that. And
wow.
They was making us fly on Sunday, and we didn't like it. Oh, Lord. But they didn't, they let us get by with stuff then. You couldn't do that now. But
well, you've said, talked to some about your instructors, so you pretty well, some of them were kind of mean, but you respected them, and you felt like you had some good instructors.
Yeah, respect them, because they really taught us how to fly. They did.
And since this happened after Pearl Harbor, didn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So you were kind of under the gun, I think, to get some training.
Get that
quickly,
training.
huh?
That's right.
Yeah.
And they didn't mess with us much, actually. I mean, we wasn't in training long before they shipped us overseas.
Okay, okay. So you did serve in World War II. Now, after you finished your flight training, you headed overseas.
Right.
Tell us about where you left from and where you went.
All right. Of course, they always make a mistake, and we landed on the west side of North Africa. I think it's, I believe it's Oran or something up on the west side. But they carried our planes down to Casablanca. And there we were on one side, and the trunk plane's way over there, and another ship. And so they put us on a train, and we went, oh, what a mess that was. And we went from there on that train down to Casablanca, where our planes were. And we started flying down there out of Casablanca, and then all the way up through North Africa, and then into Sicily.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, is what kind of where all did you go? So you started out there in Casablanca and spent most of your time there in North Africa?
On up into North Africa, up in the northern part.
Okay.
And the strafing, we lost a lot of boys, I declare. And
Now,
this,
where was this? You said you lost a lot
uh,
in North Africa?
yeah, there,
So-
and then we lost two of the boys in the ocean flying over to Sicily. And so they got a rule then that that if a plane was in trouble, his wingman or somebody had to stay with him, because we lost, I think, about 3 or 4 boys and didn't know what happened to them. And but I know 2 of them went in the ocean.
Do you remember how you felt? Like you said, when you got to Africa, you said your planes weren't there. So how long did it take you to get across to?
It took us, I forget now, a long time. I don't know, I was going to say a week, but maybe not quite a week to go across.
But that was kind of a frustrating time for you, not being able to. You were ready to go, and you
with
didn't,
nothing to eat.
Didn't have anything to eat. Huh? What did you do for food?
Well, we tried to get stuff when they'd stop the train. We tried to get some. Of course, they didn't have nothing either much.
Don't know what kinds of food they would have had anyway. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what was your job assignment then once you started? Was it a bomber? I mean.
Oh, yeah, dive bombing.
You were dive bombing. So kind of explain that to us.
We were flying. They were P-51s, but they called them A-36s. We had dive brakes on the wings that would come out on each wing, and you could get up about 10 or 15,000 feet and turn them straight nose down and dive. And those dive brakes would hold it back to about 400 miles an hour. And we could put a bomb in a circle. And we did a lot of that. We'd go out with a 500-pound bomb and drop it, and then get down in the highway and strafe coming back. And we got a lot of credit over that, but it never did get in the papers or anything.
I was going to ask you if you had any big successes that you can recall.
We had a lot of the infantry people. They sure did brag on us what we did. I remember one time we was on we done got over to Sicily, and it was in mountains back there, and we'd been out and dropped the bombs, and coming back, I think about 8 started out, and so we split up. There's 4 of us in my group, and we came back on this highway, down in the highway, just 2 or 3 feet off the ground, and we come around this highway there, around the mountain, and there was two trucks loaded with German soldiers. Oh, Lord. And we started strafing it and all, and we blowed up one of the trucks, and what I never will forget long as I live, I went down and strafed and pulled up, and them German soldiers were taking the knives or the whatever they had and was cutting that canvas and jumping out the side. I never saw the beat in my life. They couldn't get out of the back end fast enough, so they jumping through the canvas, jumping. But we stayed down, made circle after circle, and when we left, wasn't anything moving there. And that one truck was on fire that blowed up. I'll never forget that. But we sure did do a lot of strafing out there. And I think that's what got me. I believe some cross-eyed fellow shot me.
Well, I was going to ask you, you saw combat, so that's definitely you were in the midst of that, weren't you?
Yeah, we'd come back with bullet holes in our planes and stuff. And
how many casualties would you say from your unit?
Oh, have mercy.
Just continuous.
You mean?
And all you just probably there was just more than you could count.
Oh, Lord, yeah.
Yeah.
Because we'd come down a highway, and then there'd be some German trucks on it, and we'd really work them over. See, our plane had 6 guns on it, 50 caliber, 2 in the nose, and then 2 on each side of the wing, so 6 guns, and a wooden frame building, and then it had tracers every so many bullets, and then there'd be a tracer. If there's a wooden building, we'd set it afire. And tracers would set it afire. And
So you feel sure you had lots of casualties. I'm thinking too, within your unit, did you have?
oh, we lost
you lost a lot.
Oh, we lost a lot of boys. I just laughed. Sure did lose a lot of them.
Can you tell me about some of your most memorable experiences? I want you to go into detail about you being captured and stuff, but I want to, any other thing that you would want to talk about?
Well, we lived in tents.
Okay.
Dirty. We were dirty. And we didn't have, one thing that we really appreciated was that Red Cross would come in there with a van and have some kind of drinks and all for us.
I was going to ask you about, did you have any fresh water or any? Nothing?
That's awful, that water. And, but we always bragged on them gals, them Red Cross gals.
Glad to see them, weren't you? Yeah. What kinds of food would they bring you other than drinks?
The Red Cross mostly just drinks and candy and stuff like that. But they tried to get food into us, but we stayed too far ahead of them or something. We didn't get much food.
Now, the next question I come to is, were you a prisoner of war? I think you've told me you were. Would you tell me about that experience? As much as you can remember and what all you would like us to know.
Yeah, we went out and dropped our bombs and then came back strafing. And we'd, I forget how many German trucks that we saw on the road and strafed. And then we come across a little airfield. It had, I forget how many planes in it, about 8 or 10 or something like that. And we strafed it. And while we were strafing it, we'd making passes on it and just setting them afire. And I felt something hit my plane, and my oil gauge went out. And I thought, uh-oh. So we wasn't so far from the lines, and what messed me up was when we was down at Waycross, we had a couple of pilots that come in there that flew P-40s down somewhere. I forget where it was. And they were telling us about all the combat and everything, and how good those motors were, how tough they were. And one was telling about his all line was shot out, and he flew about 10 minutes. And I kind of figured a little bit. I said, my Lord, if I can fly 10 minutes, I can fly back to the base. That was a mistake.
Wasn't true. Huh?
No, and that was in the mountain ridge there, and me and this boy, and old Jones was my wingman, and we started back, and it was the last ridge there, and I tried to go over it, but I was leaving a stream of smoke, and my engine just that slowed down. I was about to fall out, and I kicked it around and went down the side of the mountain, and it's already on fire, and I tell you that the only reason I believe I came out of that, my mother and my grandmother, when they said prayers at night, they didn't bend over like most people do. They got around on their knees, and I believe my mother getting around on her knees brought me home. I always will believe that.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, because wasn't nobody supposed to come out of no plane on fire and then landed down in the woods and cutting off trees, and that's where I got that.
Okay, so you got injured as you fell, as you crashed.
That knocked me out, but a wall of fire hit me, and of course I got it in here. It burned all the hair off my legs, even up to my shorts. That fire did.
Wow.
But that woke me up.
Oh.
And as soon as it stopped rolling, I jacked the canopy and give a jump, and hit the wing and rolled off and started running. I run about, I guess about far as that wall yonder, and I looked down and dirt was jumping up in my feet, around my feet, and the Germans were shooting at my feet, legs and feet.
Oh my goodness.
And so I stopped, and about that time a plane blowed up. But I landed right down in the lines. If I'd have went across that ridge, I'd have went home. But I couldn't make
This one meant to be.
it. And Jones, they shot him down, but he fell on the other side of that ridge, and he went home. Of course, he broke his back. But
So the only injury you got from that crash was your head?
well, no, broke ribs.
Okay, but they didn't shoot you. They didn't hit you.
No, dirt was jumping
so
up,
close, huh?
jumping up between my feet, and they were shooting at me.
So how long did it take them to catch you?
Oh no, I was right there. And
they were right on you.
They
huh?
told me to come up and sit in the gully. But another thing I was going to say that Doris wanted me to say is that when I jumped out of my plane and hit the wings, I looked back at it, and me and my crew chief, he was a good one. I declare he'd polish it up, and he said, that'll get you about 10 miles faster. And he got a fella to paint a lady's picture on the side of my plane. And there's a Georgia Peach, we put her name down there.
Oh.
She was red-headed, and her hair was flowing back. And when I jumped off and hit the wing there, I looked there, and she was melting.
Oh.
I never will forget that.
Yeah. Your Georgia Peach melted, huh?
Oh, Lord.
So, okay, they caught you and told you to sit down. Then what happened?
No, they brought me up and made me stay in a ditch the rest of the evening. And then that night, it was 2 or 3 wounded there, and weren't wounded Germans. And they throwed us in a van and started us going down to the coast there. And I never will forget, on the way down there, they stopped and met another van, and they pulled me out. And this fellow started just screaming at me, he was screaming. And he pulled his gun out and stuck it in my stomach. And then it was a German captain on the van that I was in. He was wounded, and he came out there and hit that German upside the head and knocked him down. I believe he would have shot me. And then this officer showed me on his van, there was strafing marks on top of it where we had strafed his van, and it killed, I think it was 2 of people he had on there, wounded people. And he was screaming at me, and he was, I believe he'd have shot me if they also hadn't hit him. But then we went up, and it was 2 barges, 3 barges there at, I forget the little old town's name, at the upper end of Sicily there. And they was going to load us on there. And about that time, my outfit came over, and they started dropping bombs and strafing and going on, and everything that could run or walk headed for the buildings, you know. And I started to leave and go, and there was a German laying there, had his leg shot off. He pulled his gun and made me come and sit next to him, and there's all that strafing and bombing going on. And they sunk one of the barges and strafing the buildings there. But after it's over with, we loaded on the barge. And I think we stayed on them barges. We went up to Naples, and I don't know how long it took us on that barge, but no food, nothing. And they got up at Naples, and they treated me pretty good in that hospital. I stayed there 2 weeks. And then they came in there and brought my clothes, and there's 2 guards got me and said, we're going to move into another camp. And we'd get on a train, and we spent most of the time on the siding because it wasn't an important train. And the soldiers and material and stuff, you know, they'd let them by, and we'd just sit there. I forget how long it took us. It was over a week, I think, going up to Sargon. And I never will forget, we was on a siding, and this little German, I met him in the hospital down there, nice little, most of the Germans could talk English just real good. And this little boy had been a candy salesman in England. And when the war started, he come back home and got in on it. And he told me, he says, we sitting on the side of the Vatican. He said, you want to come over here and look at it? And I asked the guards, and they nodded their head, and I went over there, and we sitting on the siding there, right next to the Vatican City. And you have never seen buildings like that in your life. All of them got steeples on it, gold steeples. Oh, they're beautiful. But I never forget that old boy called me over and let me look at it. But we got up there to Sargon, and they threw me in a room there, and no windows or nothing in it. And they didn't take me out the rest of that day, and the next day they brought me out. This German officer questioned me, asked me all about my outfit and everything. And they'd done warned us not to tell anything except your social number and his name. And he knew he knew more about my outfit than I did, but I didn't know. He said, I got to get this information and give it to the Red Cross to let them know it made sense, you know, but I didn't. I never did tell him. But after the second day there, they turned me out and carried me down to Sargon, Starlight Loop number 3. And what always got me, it was some British boys that had already been in there nearly 4 years in prison.
That was a shock to you, wasn't it? When you
They
saw
finally
them?
moved all the British boys out to another camp and put us in there. Well, there's a bunch of them there in prison right there.
Kind of, what was that like?
Oh, awful. And the officers, they wouldn't let them work, wouldn't let us work. I believe I'd have been a whole lot better off working or doing something than just sitting there and doing nothing. And we'd walk, me and this old boy, I'll never forget, old Mike Cousy. I couldn't find him after the war. I couldn't find him nowhere. He saved my life. And we'd walk around the fence. And then there's another old boy in my camp there, old J. Overman. I'll never will forget it. He was from Wolf Creek, Montana. And he'd tell me about the flu went through and killed his parents. And he stayed with his first cousin, moved in with them, and they raised him. And this was in a hunting area. And him and his cousin went out and got a license to handle these hunters. And these hunters down from New York and all would come there, and they'd go out hunting wild boar and all like that. And they'd sit in camp drinking and going on, and him and his cousin would go out and kill these bears and wild boars. And they'd take the heads home, you know, and hang them on the wall.
Hunted.
Yeah, but he and the cousin had killed most of them for him, and they'd just stay in camp. But he'd tell me all about that and how living up there in Montana was. And another thing that got off with me about that flu, never did think about it much, but all of y'all heard your families talk about it. About 1918 or something, that flu went through the whole country. And he lived in Montana, and then I flew with an old boy from Texas, and his parents died from that flu. And by the way, he's a federal judge now, and we still correspond and talk to one another. But that flu killed a lot of people. A lot of people died all over the country, all over. But that's awful in that camp. We had, let's see, in our camp there, I think we had 4 suicides. That's left.
So how long were you in this camp?
Well, I spent most of the time there. Let's see, I guess about a year and a half stayed there. And like Doris was telling you over there just now, that second Christmas, we had to turn the lights out about 7 o'clock. But old Bing Crosby, the Red Cross did it. They sent us some records over there, and 2 of them was old Bing Crosby's, and one of them is I'll Be Home for Christmas, and the other one was White Christmas. And them fool boys would wind up graphing over. They'd keep playing it just all way in the night. And I'll never forget, as long as I live, hearing them old boys crying. And I believe that's about the saddest time in my life that I've ever been in my.
Well, that definitely would have been a very
I can hear
memorable.
I can hear that song now, especially for being singing it, and hair stand up on my neck. It does.
something you could never forget, I'm
I'll
sure.
never forget
Yeah,
that.
Yeah.
That was the second Christmas there. And then I never will forget it. We kept hearing all these rumors and everything about the Russians, and you could hear the guns even. And then about 3 o'clock one morning, they come in there and told us to move out, move us out. And we started walking, and the snow was about a foot deep. And let's see, about the second night, we got to this old part of the plant, and it still had some heat in it. And you was trying to save every bit of food you had, and I had some canned stuff toting it. You was toting everything you owned, and because you know you wasn't coming back. And I got food poisoning there. And then after I got that food poisoning, I took pneumonia. And we stayed there about 2 days, and then we got to walking again. And we walked about 100 miles and all. And they'd walk, and at night they'd stop, and they'd in a little old town. It'd be a church or a courthouse or something, and we'd lay on the floor. And I got so sick, and that old Mike Cousy, I'll never forget him. We had 2 blankets, and he'd lay them down and roll us up together. And long about that last, till we got to Springburg, and they put us on a train. I didn't know nothing. And
You were kind of
he was
delirious.
keeping me walking.
Just,
Because he knew, and we'd already seen them shoot some of them, you know, that quit walking, couldn't go anywhere, they'd just shoot them. And, but he kept me going, and we finally got on that train, and I forget how long we stayed on that. And I never will forget that. We didn't have any bathrooms, anything. And when they'd stop, some of the boys would relieve themselves out on the side. And these German women would go by. I never will forget that long as I live, how they'd act. But we stayed on that train, I forget, 2 or 3 days. And they moved us down to Mooseburg, and that's down in the southern part. And then they put us out, and it wasn't organized down there any, and food, they didn't have nothing to eat hardly. And I never will forget, you could look over there on the hill. Mooseburg kind of reminded me of Athens. It's on the hill, and you could look over and see it. And I never will forget us sitting over there, and we saw an American flag go up over there. And then in a little while, 2 tanks came in the camp there. And one of them, old Patton, was standing up on it. And he did look like a rooster now, I'll tell you. He had both his guns on, you know, and he'd come in there and called us all together. And I never will forget, he says, now I can stop my army and feed y'all, or either I can go on and win this war and stop it. And he says, stopping this war is a whole lot more important. Told us that. He put guards all around the camp there. And that night we tore nearly all of the fence down and went into Mooseburg. And them Germans, a lot of them would grab us and try to pull us in their homes. The Russians, I saw them having sex with women out on the sidewalk.
Oh, my goodness.
They just, of course, the way they treated them Russians now, I couldn't hardly blame them much, the way they treated them. But I never will forget that. And the Germans were trying to get the Americans to come in the house and save them. And we went in, I don't know, we went in a couple of houses and stealing stuff. And I know we went in a lot of those boys were stealing pistols and stuff like that. But I got a butcher knife and a cup. I was hungry. All the Germans, they down in the basement, they had some food hid, and that's what we was looking for. And, but I still got that butcher knife and that cup.
So you were able to keep that?
Yeah.
Well, I know that
But a lot of the boys, they got all kind of antique stuff. And, but I was hunting something to eat.
So you kept going?
Kept going.
Yeah.
And,
so when did you ever get where you felt like you had a good meal? And
they finally come in there with some food, yeah. And old Patton had told them, and it might be his outfit that brought it in there. But we stayed there for about, I don't know, really a week after we was liberated. And then they flew some planes in there, and like I said in here, they dusted us for lice. And
yeah,
put us on.
tell us about that when you were liberated and they were getting ready to take you somewhere. What'd they do to you?
Well, they sprayed us, dusted us for lice, and we got on the.
Did you get to get a good bath? I wondered that.
No, we didn't get that.
No bath, just dust.
But we did get a bath after we got down to Le Havre, France, and they put us in down there, and I'll never forget as long as I live. We was all sitting in there, and they came around and offered us a trip to Paris, to London. That if you wanted to go, they'd take you, you know, and you know, it wasn't but just a few, 2 or 3 that went. All the rest of us were ready to go home.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what did you?
And I'll never forget that. And then we were sitting in there about the, I don't know, 3rd or 4th day, and just sitting there. And somebody came in, as somebody that worked on a boat, came in there and said, looking for Lieutenant Gaines, hollering it out, you know, and I told him I was Lieutenant Gaines. He said, you're supposed to report down at the dock and bring all of your equipment. And I thought, have mercy, what in the world is it? And I got my stuff together, and we went off down there, and this little short fella, come off his ship there and come in and met us. He said, you've been selected to be in charge of all the Army personnel on this ship. I said, great goodness. And I'll never will forget it. He told me, he said, hey, you're going to be bunking up there next to me. And he says, it's probably going to be some people a whole lot higher rank than you are coming in here. And he says, they liable to take you out and put you down in the basement with the rest of them. And he said, if I was you, I'd pick out somebody with some rank to stay up there with you. And I said, I'll do that. And I grabbed a little colonel, and it was a major that tried to take my place, and this colonel said, oh, that's his job, you go on. But I never will forget that. And I was, my bunk was up there on the top deck with the captain, you know. I'd sit up there and I could look out over everything. But I was in charge of all the personnel, everything on the ship. And I was up there that day and we came the northern route back to the United States. And I never will forget long as I live. I was up there and the bell started ringing and the siren was going off. And then it come hollering out that there's iceberg. And the ships was going everywhere. I think there was about 30 ships in our convoy, and there was a British admiral or something in charge of it. And but I declare that ships, you see them going this way, that way, and I looked up there, and here come a ship right into ours, just coming right into it. And both of them throwed them sideways, and this ship came right down the side of ours. And you know how a ship has got the lifeboats swinging out over the side. He sheared off every one on that side. And it just marked the ship. It didn't cut a hole in it or nothing. And, but And I figured that was a little lucky too.
So how did they get things back organized, get them back together and proceed on home? How did that?
They never did get
Oh, they never-
completely back together
Oh, okay.
because they kind of went individually coming
Oh,
back.
I
You know.
see. So how long did it take you to get back home?
Oh, Lord have mercy. And then we got to come into New York up there, up in the harbor up there, and let us out, and then put us on a train, and I come all the way down.
Now, you came from New York to
Home-
Atlanta? Or?
Atlanta, and then
Okay.
to Elberton
Okay. How'd you get from Atlanta to Elberton?
on a bus.
On the bus?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did your...
And what bothered me, that we went through Elberton, is late at night, I started to jump off.
Yeah, you wanted to get out,
I started to jump off, I did.
but you couldn't do that, huh? Now, did your family know to expect you at a certain time? or-
I had called them, they let us call them in New York, and I run into Clyde's sister. She was down at Elberton there when I came in, and I didn't have no way to see our home was about 10 miles out of Elberton.
So you...
And she says, I'm gonna take you home to your mama.
How did you feel on that ride home that day?
Oh, have mercy.
Couldn't... What were your feelings? Can you think?
I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it.
Yeah.
And another thing that always got me and got off with me is when we got, my daddy wasn't there, but my mother was there in the yard, and she saw us coming, and she grabbed me and she felt all over me. She thought I'd lost a leg or something.
Yeah.
But she felt that. I'll never forget that. She went over me good.
Well, her prayers were answered, huh? She
I believe it was. I believe it was down on her knees, the one that did it too, because then many people come out of a plane on fire and landed in trees and stuff like that.
Now, did you get any medals or any sort of thing? while
Not,
you were...
not for that.
No.
Just Purple Heart.
Just, you got a Purple Heart?
Yeah.
Got the medals and things.
Okay. Well, you tell us about getting these medals. What all medals did you get? Do you have it in your little booklet there?
Yeah,
And I think you might, if you would turn the page around and show that you have a picture on the front of your little
Yeah.
file here that...
the
Tell
Germans
us
made
about that picture.
the Germans made that picture when I got up to Sargon. That's after I got out of the hospital, and you can't tell it hardly, but that's a bandage all the way across my head there on account of this hole in my head here, and that was over 2 weeks. It's a bad one. You feel my skull and everything in there.
I can see by the scar that it was a pretty big cut.
Yeah, it
cut.
cut down to my skull. But that's the picture the Germans made there. And when we was liberated there at Mooseburg, we went in the office and grabbed
Okay,
everything
so-
we could get.
Oh,
and I got my folder,
You got your folder. Well, that was
and it
neat.
had that
Oh,
picture on it.
Okay. Well, what other medals are recommendations?
Let's
did
see,
you get? Tell us about that.
Purple Heart Air Medal, World War II Medal, European Campaign Medal, and American Campaign Medal.
Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's a pretty impressive list of medals.
Mhm.
All right. What did you do then in the days and the weeks right after you got home from the war?
Let's see, I stayed at home I think it was about a week. And then they let us ask for any outfit that we'd ask for, we'd get preference. And I'd found out a lot of my old buddies had gone to the Proving Ground Command down in Florida. And I put in for it, and it came right through. And so here, they sent us down to Alabama first, so they got us back flying. And we flew there for about a week or something, and then they sent me on down to Florida. That's where I run into that Federal Judge fellow, and flying with him down there, and also as Frank Smith. He was a real good friend of mine. He went on and got his doctorate degree, and he was a professor up at North Georgia. And I'd go by there, and I'd call him and ask him about going on a trip or something. He said, when? Me and him went to Las Vegas 2 or 3 times. And down in Proving Ground Command, you wouldn't believe it, but we had planes down there, and we'd fly them, and they had a little new instrument on them. And when we got back, we'd write them up, how they acted and everything. And me and him, I don't know how many times we flew to California and back to New York and back to Florida on the weekend. And we flew all over this country. But on airfield, we'd stop, fuel up, you know, here we go. And then get back, we'd write up that little instrument, whatever it was, new in the plane. And then they brought some P-80s down there, and I got about 100 hours in the P-80. That gets your attention.
Mm-hmm.
They had, that motor was so smooth in there. Is some of the instruments, they had little vibrators on the side of them to make them work. The motor was so smooth.
So I can see you still had a love for flying then after you got out of the
did.
service, right?
And then they kept on, and like I say, we was having a big time down there. And they were getting ready to ship us out to Japan. And about everything down there resigned, got out, went home.
And that's when you came back home?
Got back home, and I was getting up close to 30 years old, and I found me a girlfriend and married her. And then I finally learned some sense that a person needed education.
I was going to ask you about your education.
And I got married, and then we went over to Athens, and couldn't find a place to rent nowhere. So I built a house over there, and so I got my degree in agriculture.
Okay. Then what did you do after that? You come back to...
I got a job with the Extension Service,
Oh, okay.
and I stayed with them about 6 years. And I got my training down in Blackshear, and then went to Chatsworth, and was a county agent up there. And they was having meetings about every night. They would have pulling in communities, organizing communities, and I told my wife if I had to make a living like that, I'd rather starve. So I quit. I just quit and come home and built 2 chicken houses. And old Carl Smith, the soil conservation man at Elberton, he kept coming out to the house, and he finally got me to helping him some, surveying terraces and ponds, and he kept on and he kept on, and finally he got me to put my name in the pot to join up with Soil Conservation Service. And it came right through. And so I went with Soil Conservation Service, and I was up at Dahlonega, and old John Webb from Chatsworth, they was visiting, because I'd met him when I was a county agent up there, and he says, it's an opening up here for Soil Conservation Service. Says, how about coming up here and being soil conservation? I said, yeah, I'd be glad to. So I went up there, and I forget, about 16 years or something like that. I stayed up there, and then my boss told me he'd give me a promotion if I went over to Lafayette, Georgia. And so I transferred over to Lafayette.
Well, did you get supported by the GI Bill when you went to school? Did you use that? You took advantage of that? Well,
yeah,
great.
that,
Great. Okay.
yeah.
I think we've talked a little bit about some close friends that you made during the service. I know you've said the one guy that you...
Yeah.
Did you have...
We had a pretty active organization, the POW group, and the Starlight Luth 3 group. And by the way, at one of our meetings is a general that was in prison over there in our camp, and he went to Europe. And one of our meetings, they had one of our old guards there at our meeting. He wasn't mean. He was strict, but he wasn't mean. And his daughter brought him there, and he put on, gave us a little talking to. and we was in the center compound, and they had a lot of German secretaries and stuff there right close to us. And we'd look through the fence at these women, you know, and holler at them and stuff like that. And this old general got about 4 of them and brought them to one of our meetings, POW meetings. And they was telling us about what a time they had, that they walked, I forget how many miles, because the Russians were coming. And they just had an awful time, they said. But they sure wouldn't talk to us.
Well, let's see.
And then I was up at Lafayette, and my daddy died, and my mother couldn't do a thing with her. She wouldn't leave home. And Madison County came open, and I put in for it. And they sent me down to Madison County, and I stayed there about 7 years.
Oh, okay.
So then I retired.
So you've had a pretty long, I would think, life of service to the community and your country and all. And I would just like you to think about what are some good characteristics of a good leader. What would you think? Thinking about some of the leaders you had in service and in your own personal life.
Yeah. We had some good boys in the service, and I sure did respect them boys, I declare.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about the war and the military in general?